us a very special guest. His name is Rabbi Chezky Altein. He's a rabbi and the scholar at the Chabad Russian Center in Sunny Isles.
Oh.
And he actually comes from a line of Hasidic rabbis, and his father is a world-renowned, sought-after Hasidic Hasidic teaching expert, an expert in Hasidic teachings, and he's written numerous books. And as I say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Rabbi Altein, Rabbi Chezky Altein is also I know he teaches a number of courses and classes at the in very deep Hasidic teachings of JLI courses and so on. And so we're very blessed and honored to have Rabbi Chezky Altein. Rabbi Altein, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Smith. So first of all, I wanted to thank you for inviting me here. It's a great honor to be able to speak. I do want to clarify say that I don't know if the apple falls far from the tree or not. But I definitely I try my hardest to follow my father's footsteps. Although I can't say that I get all the way there. I have an older brother who's also he does a lot of these Zoom talks for a lot of different places, and he was one time when he was telling us how it's very, very frustrating to give a class on Zoom. He says because you give a class and you know when you learn with someone face to face, you get to see their reaction, you get to see their facial expressions. Are they getting you? Are they not getting you? But when it's on Zoom, he says, everybody keeps their camera off and you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know if they're even listening to you. And so you feel like you're talking to a wall. So I think I want to invite him to this group to see that, thank God, over here, I see most of the people over here have their cameras on. So we could see you. It makes it much more interesting, and it makes it easier to be able to talk to you guys. So thank you very much for that. In the time that we find ourselves now is known as the Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks. We find ourselves in the week of Parshas Matis and Masei. There is an interesting phenomena when we come to these interesting problem we have with these two words, these two parshas, these two Torah portions together. We know that Rabbi teaches us that there's no such thing that the name of a Torah portion is not accurate and specific. In fact, there are many times when you understand what the name of the Torah portion is, it allows you to be able to see the inner thread between the two Torah portions. And sometimes you have to wonder when you come to this. A few times we have the same question, and that is the word matos and maseh are seemingly opposite words. The word maseh means to travel. When you read the word maseh, matos, the first of the two Torah portions, actually it means over here, it means tribes. It means the different tribes. But the word originates from the word mata, mem tas hey, which means a stick, which usually not just shows on a stick, but it shows on a stick that's very strong, which means that it's in a steady position. So the question becomes: is this week, is our focus supposed to be traveling, moving, or is our focus supposed to be to be steadfast in one place? So there is a classical answer which Rabbi gives and many times, and that is that we need one in order to have the other. We know that one of the fundamental differences between a Jew and an angel is that as the fact that we get to do Torah and mitzvahs, we get to fulfill our obligations down here in this world, means that we could grow. Because when we have the free choice to do something and we choose to do the right thing, this shows in the fact that we're different today than yesterday. And so therefore we're better. And if we're better, we're growing. An angel, on the other hand, can only do what he's told to do. And he's only told to do what he can do. And therefore there's no place of growth. There's no traveling for the angel. The angel stays in one place his entire its entire time of being. So Maseh is who we are. Maseh, by definition, what defines us as Jews with Torah mitzvahs, with fulfillment of commandments of God. This is what defines us, is the fact that we're traveling, we're growing spiritually with leaps and bounds. But in order to be able to grow, some people, they mistaken, they say to grow means that we have to progress and change and move on and take on new ideas. And sometimes we come to these ideas and we look at them and we say, maybe it doesn't fit, like we say in Yiddish, the alte shtetl doesn't fit the way our grandparents grew up and our great-grandparents grew up. But now we live in the 21st century. We live here in America, in Miami, wherever you may be. And we live in a free world. We have to adapt. So the Torah tells us matters. You have to have a foundation which is strong. Our history is not something which we have to let go of and let change us. So when Rabbi Smith asked me to speak, so the first thing that came to my mind is, over here in the shul, we have many people who are not already retired or semi-retired, and they always come to me. They say, Rabbi, you have to teach us. And I always have the same response, and that is that I could only teach you the maseh. I could only teach you to go further. But in order to go further, we need the matos. We need the foundation. The foundation comes from those people who think that they're retired, and therefore they say, okay, we need to relax. I don't need to worry about learning and teaching. But we know that Jewish people, that doesn't work that way. My father turned 71 this year, so we had a birthday party for him. And before I went to the birthday party, I was listening a little bit to when the Rebbe celebrated his 70th birthday. What were the many things that he said? And the first thing he said is that people think that when you turn 70 or 72 or whatever age it is, you have to retire. The Rebbe says, no, that's not a time to retire. Now is the time that you don't work. So now is the time where you could truly focus on being the matos. Now is the time you could focus on making sure that the next generation and 2 generations, and for some of us, for some of you, 3 generations already, that you could teach and tell them what your life was like back when you were young and you went through a lot, and your life that you have, your life experience and your life that you have, to teach them what were the fundamental things that kept you guided, and what was the fundamental things that kept you on that you brought you to where you are today. Because those are the things that us young children, as the Maseh, we're going to travel. If we don't have them, we're definitely not going to look like our grandparents, and we need that wisdom. And so last night I was trying to think of what I was going to say. So I was preparing myself and I was thinking through, and then we know that Rabbi taught us that we should learn every day a part of the Torah portion. So just to strengthen this in yesterday's Torah portion, one of the things that we have is that the Rebbe says, that the Rashi says in his commentary, that why did they come to the generals? That the older people have to know, the leaders have to know that they have to make sure the young ones have what they need. There's an interesting story that I read recently of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he says that there was a rabbi, and the rabbi was in a community somewhere, and he was working very hard. And at one point he came to the Rebbe, and they were discussing, and he told the Rebbe that he works very hard in educating the youth, and on Shabbos afternoon he gives a class for whatever it was in the shul. And the Rebbe asked him immediately, what does your wife do? So he said, she stays at home. What should she do? So the Rebbe told him to tell his wife that to stay at home is not very it's a waste. You're wasting the time. You should, instead of staying at home by yourself, you should invite other women to come, and they should learn together with you. And so he came back and he told his wife, the Rebbe wants that you should learn with people. What should you learn with the girls and the women? The Rebbe suggested that you should learn Mishnayos, I think. So she told her husband, that's very nice, I'll teach Mishnah, but who's going to prepare it with me? So her husband said, the Rebbe suggested that I should prepare the class with you. And so now she was very excited because now she was going to be able to spend an hour every week with her husband, or 2 hours, where he was going to teach her the Mishnah that they were going to learn, and he was going to give her other places to find more. And sure enough, he did that, and she concluded the entire Mishnayos and the children. But the point I'm trying to bring out is that there's nobody who doesn't have their time and their place, that they have to be focused on trying to bring the education to the next person. That sometimes we think that it's not for us, but the truth is that really every single person has this obligation, this to bring it out to the next generation. I want to share with you another story of not so much an education as much of learning, but as much as education as giving guidance, and to show appreciation for those who give us guidance, how one should show appreciation. There was a young girl. She was born to two handicapped parents. Her mother had cerebral palsy. I'm sorry, I don't pronounce these words correctly. And her father was a deaf mute. I'm not sure exactly what brought two people like this together, but today we have, Baruch Hashem, thank God, there's many institutions to be able to support such a marriage. But in those days, it was a little bit harder. Talking about in the 1940s. And this young girl was born to their parents, and her father passed away at the young age of 10. Although her parents passed away at the young age of 10, she went and she thrived in her Jewish education at the Jewish school in Boston called Maimonides, which was connected to the Yeshiva University, the YU school, Rabbi Soloveitchik, who had a school there. And with time that she was growing up, eventually she met the local Chabad rabbi, the shliach in that area, and the shliach brought her to the Rebbe, and she came to Chassidic gatherings, and she really, really enjoyed and appreciated this that she got from them. At one point in her life, she was finishing high school, and as she was finishing high school, she had gone to find what she should do next. What's the next step that she should do? So today there's many choices, even in good Jewish schools. But in those days, the only option that a person had was to go to college. So she went to the dean of the school. She had a meeting with the dean of the school, Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was a very, very, and until today he's passed away, but he's still very, very well-known and respected authority on many things. On many things halachic, and on many things in halacha the way they pertain in the modern world. And she asked him, what do you think I should do going forward? On one hand, I want to go to college, but on the other hand, I have a very strong feeling that I need to strengthen my personal religious identity and my personal life before I could go off to college. So Rabbi Soloveitchik told her that before you go to seminary, I want you to know that today in the world, you're talking about the 1960s, today in the world, if you want to be able to survive, you need to have a college degree. And without a college degree, you can't do anything, and you won't be able to support yourself, you won't be able to live. And therefore, I strongly recommend that it's very important for you to be able to go. But she didn't know what to do. She was very conflicted. She was very, very torn. On one hand, she very, very much wanted to go to a seminary where she could grow before she goes off to college. So she decided to write a letter to the Rebbe and to ask him what he thought. She had come in contact with many of his shluchim, many of his emissaries. She had learned some of the Chassidic philosophy in Tanya, and now she didn't know what to do. So she asked him what he thought. And the Rebbe responded in a very interesting, not saying no, that you shouldn't go to college, which was the common answer that he would give, but also understanding where the person was coming from and taking into respect where she was coming from. The Rebbe told her that it's very, very important that you get a good Jewish identity, exactly like you said, to go to a Jewish seminary for a year. And after you go to the seminary and you have a good Jewish background, then you should go off to college. And this is a side note, which is really not relevant unless you're going to be encouraging your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren at this point. And that is that, especially today, going to college is not like it was 40 or 50 years ago. But today there's so much. I mean, I spent 2.5 years as a rabbi on a campus. There's so much not anti-Semitism, not anti-Zionist, it's just hatred, pure hatred for no reason towards anything Jewish for sure, and traditional specifically. So it's always good, even if to go to college, to make sure that our children and our grandchildren, this thought that they have a very strong Jewish identity and they recognize what they're doing and where they're going, to be able to I'm going to use the word deflect, but more importantly, to be able to stand up and to appreciate who they are in order before they go into such a place. But back to the story. So this girl hears this piece of advice from the Rebbe. So she goes off to a seminary in Williamsburg, and in the afternoon, in order to help pay for it, because her father had passed already when she was a 10-year-old girl, and her mother was handicapped. So in order to be able to help pay for the seminary, she used to work, and not just pay for the seminary, but to be able to live, she used to work as a nanny in a rabbi's house. There was a couple who lived next door to her, and the couple told her, why don't you, we see who you are, we see how much you appreciate your Jewish values. There's a very special man who lives in Israel, and we think you should marry him. And we think it would be a good idea for you to meet. So she wasn't sure what to do. So she went and asked the Rebbe again, what should she do? So the Rebbe told her, you live in America, he lives in Israel. We would say, mach sich nicht meshuggah. Don't go yourself crazy. Today you can get on a plane. Well, not today, but 2 years ago, you can get on a plane, and if in a few hours you'd be in Israel, it'd be fine. But today, in those days, to get on a plane, to go to Israel, to meet a guy that maybe not, the Rebbe says, don't bother yourself. So she wasn't sure about the whole thing anyway, so she was very happy to be able to calm down. A little while later, another suggestion came up, and this was a local suggestion. So hearing that the Rebbe had told her that if it's not local, don't even consider it, and this was local, so she considered it, and she went out on a few dates. And then she wrote to the Rebbe, she still wasn't sure. And the Rebbe responded to her, do you like him? Pretty straightforward. She wasn't expecting that to come from a rabbi, to be a very straightforward question. And so she said, yeah, I like him. I mean, you have to love every Jew. So the Rebbe says you can't marry someone who you like because you have to love every Jew. If you want to marry the person, you got to love the person. So she understood that to mean that it's not a very good suggestion. Later on, she got engaged. And when she got engaged, the Rebbe told her that she should go back to Rabbi Soloveitchik and make sure that he knows that she got engaged. So she asked the Rebbe, why should I go to Rabbi Soloveitchik? What did he? Rebbe, he was a student in the school, that he was the dean. So the Rebbe said to her, and this is something which very, very important lesson to take, and that is, when he gave you advice to go to college, you didn't listen. He probably wasn't hurt because a lot of people, whatever, you understood, you made your own decision. But share with him also good news. Show with him that you didn't forget about him and that you have something good to share with him, and he'll be very appreciated. This memory, this important thing to always remember to recognize. Later on, after she was married and she was teaching, she wrote to the Rebbe. She was living in a small town somewhere and teaching in a school, and she wrote to the Rebbe that she's very lonely, and the Rebbe responded to her regarding the loneliness. The Rebbe said that a teacher should never be lonely. When you're educating somebody, when you're giving something over and trying to create the next generation, you never should be lonely. Why not? Why should you never be lonely? So Rabbi said, because when you look at the person you're giving, when you look at the person and you give them what they need, and you realize that by giving them their fundamental, by giving them, like we said before, their matters, their strength, their background, where they come from, and you show them how to be a masa, you guide them in how to be able to go forward. When they go forward later on, just bring you pleasure. When you see them growing, this should give you much pleasure. And knowing that because of the education you gave them, they're going to be able to continue their education to the next generation and so on and so forth. This should always bring you comfort. This should always bring you the comfort that you need. During the Zoom age, while it has the upside that we could live across the world and listen to a class anywhere in the world very easily, because everybody's allowing everybody to join every class, but sometimes it's lonely. But when we focus on what our job is, to be the matters, to give the strength to them, we find the comfort, and we find the this that we need in order to be able to stay forward. And just one last thing with this woman, later on in life, when she once came to the Rebbe and was asking a bunch of questions, and she told the Rebbe that sometimes there's two things that come to her. Some things it's very, very much who she is, and she's very excited to do it. And sometimes the thing that comes up is not exactly who she is, and it's hard. So she doesn't know what should she choose to do. Should she choose the things that's hard for her to do, or should she choose the things that's easy for her to do? The Rebbe told her that today we have to always remember that time is moving fast, and it's chatoif v'echol. You have to seize the moment. Always grab what you need to do, the most important thing that you think at that moment, and make sure to get it done. You can't say and you can't rely on the fact that, someone else will do it, someone else will come around. But it's especially important now that we're during these 3 weeks, we're during the time between the siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. I actually heard of something that I never heard before, so I'll just share it with you, because I talking about seizing the moment. There's a conflict that's brought down when the destruction of the temple was, everybody agrees, was on the 9th day of the month of Av. But when the siege of Jerusalem started, there's a conflict. Some people say it started on the 9th day of Tammuz, and other places it says that it started on the 17th day of Tammuz. In 2 verses, one says like this, one says like that. So the Talmud asks, how could you have a question? What does it mean? Some people say the siege started then, and some people say the siege started then. 2 different dates. Open up a calendar and check what day did it start. There's a historical record. How could you have 2 historical records of the same event that don't line up? I know in today's world we have more than one historical record of everything, and nothing lines up. But in the time of the Talmud, things lined up. The historical facts are historical facts. So Talmud asks, how could you have two? You can have questions of opinion, you can have questions of laws, but you can't have questions of facts. Did it start on the 9th? Did it start on the 17th? And the Talmud answers that kilkul acheshbon. They messed up the calculations. So the Rebbe asks a question: what kind of answer is that? You're talking about a verse in the Torah. What kind of calculation is that? The Torah made a mistake with the calculation. So the Rebbe puts a beautiful seize the moment type of. The Rebbe says kilkul acheshbon does not mean that they messed up on the calculation. Kilkul acheshbon, the Rebbe says, means that the siege started on the 9th day of Tammuz, but it wasn't a real siege. It was small sieges. And had the Jewish people inside the city of Jerusalem realized what was going on, they would have grabbed the opportunity, and they would have fought back, and they would have done what they had to do. They would have avoided the whole thing. But instead, kilkul acheshbon, they made a wrong calculation in understanding what was going on, and they didn't seize the moment. And they had a bunch of these moments from the 9th until the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, and then it was too late. At that point, the full siege came, and at that point, it was too late. So we have to seize the moment. We have to not stop during these times. it's supposed to be a time of mourning. It's supposed to be a time of sadness. These 3 weeks. It's supposed to be a time when we don't focus so much on our joys, and instead we focus on our sorrows, not our personal sorrows, but the sorrows of the temple. I don't think I need to share with anybody that we have enough sorrows on our own, personal, communal, global, that we don't have to focus. We had enough sorrows in our life. We don't have to focus on them anymore. The Rabbi taught us that now it's time to focus on the positive. Now it's time to focus on the positive. The Medrash tells a story. The Medrash tells a story during the time of the destruction of the temple, in a different country far away. There was 2 people standing together, a Jew, an Arab, and a non-Jew, an Arab, and a Jew, 2 guys. And the Jewish person was plowing his field. And it was the 9th day of Av, whatever year the destruction of the temple happened. And the Jew is plowing his field. And all of a sudden, the Arab looks at him and says, "What's your history? Where do you come from?" So he tells him, "I'm a Jew." So he tells him, if you're a Jew, then you have to dismantle your ox from the plow and stop working. So he asked him, "Why do I have to dismantle an ox from the plow and stop working? What happened?" So he says, "Because the temple is being destroyed in Jerusalem." So the Jew asked him, "And if you don't mind, how do you know that?" So he says, "The cow gave a zamu that I knew that's what was happening. I understand. I was taught the language of the cows." So the Jew said, "Okay, I trust you. What should I do?" So he started dismantling it, and before he could completely dismantle it, the cow gave another moo. So the guy looked at him and said, "Forget it." So he says, "What do you mean? Why should I forget it?" So he said, that the Redeemer of the Jews was already born, and therefore you're good to go. Don't worry. It's a weird story, and whether it's a metaphor, whether it's a real story, depending on which commentary you wanna learn, the message of the story is for sure not a metaphor. And the message is that in every time we're down, we should know that the end was already created. Like the Gemara says, that Hashem does not bring a makkah, Hashem does not bring a damage without bringing a refuah, without bringing the healing beforehand. So we have the opportunity we can focus on a lot of different things. We can focus on the destruction, which we have to, because that's what halacha dictates. That's what we have to do. We have certain things that we're not allowed to do, but we have to focus with the attitude of joy. We have to focus on the destruction, knowing that the redemption is coming, knowing that Mashiach and the 3rd temple are coming. How does one focus on the positive while going through a hard time? So the truth is, I don't know 100% the answer to that question, and I would be a fool to tell you that I do. But I have a good story that I enjoyed very much, that I'm sure will help us understand a little bit of what does it mean to keep our trust and to focus on the positive, even though we're going through a hard time. There were once two Jews who lived in the same city, and I may get some of the details slightly wrong, but like the people from my shul will tell you, I'm not good with names. I'm terrible, and with cities, I'm terrible. Names of villages, I can't keep any names in my record, and sometimes I confuse a detail or two. So please don't hold it against me if I get it or drop wrong. But if my memory serves me, if I remember from the story that I didn't read it a long time ago, so we'll see if my memory is not so bad. There was one couple. The wife believed very, very strongly in the blessings of tzaddikim, in the righteous, the blessing from a righteous man, from a tzaddik. And the other one absolutely did not believe in it. And the husbands were the opposite. The one whose wife believed, he laughed at it. The one whose wife didn't believe, he believed in it very strongly. And came a point where both of them had a problem. One of them, whose wife was a big believer, he had a medical issue. And the one whose wife was a big believer, he had a financial issue. What was his financial issue? The landlord, the local parrots, the local esquires, it's usually translated. The guy who owned the land where he lived, he had to pay him up his rent. And of course, that year was a bad year, and he didn't have the funds for the rent. And he was being threatened with being evicted from his home. Not knowing what to do, his wife tells him, I think you should go and ask, I forget which Rebbe it was, for a blessing. So of course he laughed. He says, what's the Rebbe going to do for me? How's the Rebbe going to help me? And he pushed her off. It goes by a few weeks, and his friend tells him, listen, I'm very sick. I have a medical problem. I'm going to this and this Rebbe to ask for a blessing. When his wife hears this, she says, look, he's going anyways. Go along for the ride. He's your friend. What do you care? Just go. So he says, okay, I'll go. If I have no. I'm not going to make any husband-wife jokes. So he says, he goes along for the ride. And the way it worked by this Rebbe was that you wrote down your question on a piece of paper, and the Rabbi would take your note and would give it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe would read your note and would give you a blessing. But you did not talk. The two guys came together and each one wrote down their question for the Rabbi, for the assistant, and the assistant came in and the assistant mixed up the notes. So the guy who had a question in his health, the Rebbe answered him, he should have everything he needs, and Hashem will help him, and everything will be okay. And being a believer, that's all he needed to hear, and he went home. The guy who had a financial question, the Rebbe read a question that said that he has a health question. So the Rebbe read the question, and the Rebbe gave him a remedy. The Rebbe told him he should use this and this type of medicine, with this and this type of syringes, and this and these types of bags and heat bags, and a whole remedy the Rebbe gave him. And the Rabbi wrote it all down for him, and he left. And being that he didn't believe in the Rebbes and their blessings, he had now the best joke to tell everybody. I asked the Rebbe for a blessing to pay my landlord, and the Rebbe gave me medical advice. And he's laughing, and he's laughing. And he comes home, and he tells his wife, you see, I told you, what does the Rebbe know? I ask him for a financial help, and he gives me medical advice. So his wife says, dude, what do you understand? Just listen to his advice and do whatever he says. He says, what do you want him to do? Lay down and do all this thing? She says, yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do. He starts laughing and laughing. She goes and she gets whatever the Rebbe writes, the prescription that the Rebbe writes, and she goes and she gets all the stuff. And the day comes when he has to come, the last day that he has to pay the bill. And she tells him, listen, the Rebbe's advice was that we should do medical options. So we're going to do medical options. So he starts laughing at her. But she says, listen, till here. You're going to do what I say. We're going to do what the Rebbe says. You don't have any other option anyways. What's your choice? You're going to sit and dance on your head and cry? Let's try what the Rebbe said. You don't have anything. What do you have against it? Doesn't have any other choices. So that's what he does. He gets down in the bed and she attaches all the machines to him. An hour goes by and there's a knock on the door. Opens up the door. Who's there? So the collector's there. What do you want? You owe me money. I'm sorry. Come look at my husband. Her husband's sitting in a bed. He's got all these tubes attached to him. She says, my husband is sick now. I can't do anything for you. So he goes back and tells the landlord, the husband's sick in bed, nothing they could do. So the landlord is not very happy, very pleased. So he sends back the collector, but this time with 3 police officers. And he says, really? The guy's in bed and he can't do anything? Now there's 4 of you. Pick up the bed and bring him here the way he is. Okay? So they come there, they knock on the door. And the wife says, what do you want? I told you he's sick in bed. He says, yeah. Sick in bed. And we're going to bring the bed and all the medicine to the landlord. They bring the medical patient. They're carrying him, and they come to the mansion, the palace where he lives. They open up the door and they're walking him through. And the wife of the landlord sees this poor guy sitting on a bed with machines, with whatever it was that they had in the 1800s that they considered medicine. And she says to him, what's this guy doing here? So he says, this is the guy. He owes your husband so much money already. And he was sick in bed. And the doctor said, your husband said to bring him here. So she says to him, you crazy? You're going to bring this guy here? She goes to her husband and says, are you a sick person? Are you such a terrible, evil person? A guy is sick in bed. Why? Why is he sick in bed? Probably because he's worried sick that he can't pay your rent and you're going to throw him out. So here you made a person sick. You made a person so unhealthy. You made a person so like this. And now you're going to go and you bring him here and you schlep him here and you drag him here with all his medical stuff to what? To make him to pay your rent. This is a sick thing you're doing. Look what you're doing. You're hurting these people. And she says to him, listen, either you're going to forgive him everything he owes you, and you're going to give him 3 years of free rent, or I can't live with such an evil person. So when he hears this, the landlord, he says, okay. I'll give you, I never realized how sick I made you. And he gave him everything he wanted, 3 years free rent, forgave everything and so on. They were in a terrible situation. Terrible. It was hard. But knowing that they had a blessing, that they had a blessing, they were able to go forth. This idea, I mean, there's another story with the Baal Shem Tov along similar lines. And that is that there was once the Baal Shem Tov sent his students to go learn what does it mean to trust from a certain guy in a certain inn. And the students of the Baal Shem Tov showed up, and they came, and they see a guy, and they see a guy, the innkeeper's davening, he's praying, and they're not sure where they're going to see the trust. And they see the guy, he's sitting, he's praying, he's running his business as if nothing's happening. And all of a sudden, someone walks in, and he bangs on the table. And then he walks out. So they go to the innkeeper and they say, what's the story over here? What's this guy banging on the table? So he tells them, this is the part of his collector. And why is he banging on the table? What's the meaning of banging on the table? He says, today I have to pay my rent. So he says, so why does he bang on the table? Because what happens is he comes in the morning and he bangs on the table to remind me that today is rent day. So they said to him, so why are you not going to pay your rent? So he says, oh, why am I not going to pay my rent? Because I don't have the money. I don't have the money to pay the rent. How could I go pay the rent if I don't have the money? So he says, what are you going to do? He says, what am I going to do? Nothing. Hashem always helps. Okay? There comes lunchtime, they're still sitting there, and the guy comes in, and he claps a nachamot, tzveimol. So he says, why 2 times? He says, oh, it's very simple. He comes to remind me that the day is almost there. So he says, so why are you not doing anything to get the rent? Hashem will help. Comes right before the evening, and the guy comes and gives 3 bangs on the table. And after he gives 3 bangs, they see the innkeeper go, and he puts on his coat, and he's walking very calmly. So they asked him, where are you going? So he said, I'm going to pay my rent. they said, but we were here a whole day. We know that you didn't collect any money. Where are you getting money from to pay your rent? He says, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I have till the house to get to figure out my rent. So the students of the Baal Shem Tov, they said, oh, we got to see this. This is one of a kind. We have to see what's going to happen over here. They're walking a couple 100 feet behind him, and they see a guy show up, a guy in a wagon, and they stop, and they see a conversation going back between the guy in the wagon and this guy. They're having a whole conversation. And at the end of the conversation, the wagon continues driving, and the guy continues walking. Maybe 2 minutes go by, and the guy turns around, he comes back, and he hands him an envelope. They shake hands, and the wagon driver goes one way, and he goes to the Pirates' house. And he comes back to the inn. They ask him, okay, something happened. So he says, yeah, something happened. What happened? He says, the guy in the wagon is an old customer of mine, comes every year to buy a certain product that I produce. And when he saw me, he was coming actually to my place in order to set up for next year, the next year's thing. And he wanted a certain amount. And I told him, for that amount, the price is going to be so and so. And in order to secure that price, you have to give me a down payment. How much is going to be the down payment? So I told him the number that I needed for the rent. But the guy didn't like the numbers that I gave him. So he left. So he said, so what happened in the end? He came back. He said, yeah. After a few minutes, he realized that I'm an honest person and I'm not trying to make more money than I need. And so he came back and he gave me the money. This is perhaps, like I said, I'm not going to say anything authoritative here, but this is perhaps what it means when it says that during these times of the 3 weeks, we have to remember to mourn. We're mourning the temple. We're mourning the destruction of the temple, and there's no taking away. We have to follow the laws that the way they're described 100%. But we have to do it b'simcha. The Rabbi tells us we have to do it with joy. How can we mourn with joy? Mourn with joy means, I think, perhaps, it means to remember when we're mourning that God didn't just drop us into exile. He dropped us into exile with the redemption beforehand. He dropped us into the temple was destroyed, but right away the cow said, "Don't worry." It was Meilid Mashiach Shal Yisrael. The redemption for the Jews was already being planned. When we have this belief, when we have this knowledge, not just belief, but this knowledge, it shouldn't be a belief. It should be something that we know 100%. And we know it 100% because God is kind. You know 100% that if God is a kind God, so then he doesn't give a person a harsh thing without giving the remedy on the side. Sometimes we see the remedy. Sometimes we understand where the remedy is going to come from. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes you go out of the house to go pay the rent and you don't know where you're going to get the money from, but you trust 100% the money is going to come. Sometimes you don't know how the way you're getting the money's actually going to make it. But the Rebbe says, put the vials, and Hashem takes care of the rest. When we sit down when we do the things we're not allowed to do, and we really want to do what we're not allowed to do, but we know that we're mourning, so we don't do them. We do them with the simple knowledge that Hashem is going to take us out. We could do it. We could have these opposite things in our life. We could have yira. We could have mourning, and we could do it with simcha. We could do it with joy. But ultimately, we have to know how does one come about? How does one come about bringing back and making that not just this knowledge and this bitachon, this trust and this belief in Hashem stays there, but it actually becomes our reality. That our reality becomes the fact that we have the third temple, and we know that by looking into what happened to take away the temple, we can know what to do to bring the temple back. And what brought the destruction of the temple? Destruction of the temple was brought because people had a hard time getting along. So what's going to bring back the temple? Getting along with people. I don't know how many of you watched every week. They have that they give out from GEM. They give out a video of the Rebbe where the Rebbe discusses different things. And this week, the video that they produced was about loving unconditionally. And there was a very interesting thing in there that it clears up a lot, an understanding what does it mean to love a Jew unconditionally. Sometimes it's hard to love a Jew. They say a famous joke, and they say that there was once a guy, a guy, was talking to another guy, and he says, I hate all the Jews. He's a real anti-Semite. All the Jews are terrible. So he says, what do you mean you hate all the Jews? How can you hate all the Jews? Look, who's your accountant? Isn't your accountant this guy Goldberg? He says, yeah. I hate all the Jews, but Goldberg, he's an amazing accountant. You know how much money he saves me on my taxes every year? Him I like, but all the Jews I hate. He says, what about this guy Schwartz? Isn't he a lawyer? He says, Schwartz. But he's different than all the other Jews. He's a good lawyer. He knows what he's doing. So he says, yeah, but your neighbor, another Goldberg, your neighbor, he's over there. He watches your house when you go away. What's about him? I says, okay, that neighbor, fine, he's a good Jew, but all the Jews I hate. Says to this guy, he meets a Jewish guy later on. He says, what do you think? He says, I love all the Jews. He says, really love all the Jews? The guy that sits in shul right behind you and talks the whole time and doesn't let you pray? He says, yeah, I like all the Jews, but that guy, he's a real piece of work. I can't stand him. What about your neighbor? Oh, the neighbor who has that dog, that Jewish guy with the dog that barks in the middle of the night, doesn't let me sleep. All the Jews are good, but he's a problem. I love the Jews. Sometimes it's easy to like the Jewish people, but we also have to like the Jews. Not just the Jewish people. We have to like people also. But sometimes there's real reason to be frustrated with another person. And it's hard to bring out where you could love another Jew from. How could you love that guy also? So this week I saw this story. Rabbi Lou from London said this story. He said there was a certain thing going on, and there was a certain person who was fighting him on every front. He was fighting him. He was trying to do something, and there was a certain Jew who felt differently than him, and he was fighting him. He didn't want to let him do it. At the end, he was successful in doing it or not. He doesn't say, but it came later on another campaign that he was trying to do. And he came to ask the Rebbe for a blessing. And the Rebbe told him that he should ask this Jew. So he told the Rebbe, but how could I? So the Rebbe told him that, and this was so powerful. The Rebbe told him there's 613 commandments. I'm trying to do one of them, and he feels differently in how to get it done than we do. But in the other 612, we could still work together. And when I heard that, it clarified. Sometimes we see a person, and it's hard. How am I going to love that person? Because he has something that's wrong with him. Always know that there's another whole part of the person that you could focus on. Focus on the parts. We have to learn to focus on the parts where we could get along. Focus on the parts where we could work together, and it'll already smooth out the rest. But the main thing is to recognize that we have to love another Jew unconditionally. Doesn't just mean you have to love everything about them. Eventually you'll get there, but at least start with the parts where you can work together. And to illustrate this idea of being sensitive, to being sensitive to another person. And sometimes when you love another person, you're being sensitive to them. Now, I once heard an expression: loving another person doesn't mean doing what you think is good for them, but it's understanding what they need and doing it for them, what they need. So sometimes to love another person means to be sensitive, to realize what they might need in order to take them to another place. There was a young girl. I can't remember when it was. Sometime in the 70s, I believe. She started becoming religious, and till today, there's an organization in Crown Heights called Machon Chana, which is a school for girls who are becoming religious, and it allows them to come there to live, in a dormitory, and to live in a real Jewish environment. And she came there to live. She came there to be there and to grow in her Judaism. Eventually, she was turning 30 years old and she still wasn't married. And she didn't know what to do. On one hand, she really wanted to establish a Jewish family. On the other hand, she was very nervous about her fundamentals. Is she strong enough in her Jewish knowledge to be able to actually have a Jewish home? So she wrote to the Rabbi, should she go to Israel to strengthen her Jewish knowledge, where she'd be able to go like a real, much more advanced school, or should she stay in New York and get married? And the Rabbi told her, you could stay in New York until Pesach. So she thought that meant that she was going to find a chassan, she was going to find a husband right after Pesach. And it didn't exactly work out that way, but sometime during the month of July, a proposal came up and they got engaged. And now it came a time to choose the time to get married. And her chassan, her groom, also grew up in a non-religious family. And he came from Seattle. He came from Seattle. And he grew up in a non-religious family. And he also became religious. And his rabbi was Rabbi Levitin, and from Seattle. And her rabbi was the rabbi from Machon Chana, from this school. His name was Rabbi Chezky. And they got engaged. And they had to choose a date for the wedding. She always loved the month of Kislev because it has Chanukah. She loved Chanukah. Chanukah was a holiday that really spoke to her. So she wanted to get married around Chanukah time. And the groom wanted to get married during the month of Tishrei because he knew that all his Chabad friends and his Jewish community, his religious community from the city of Seattle would be in New York then anyways, because it was traditional to come to Crown Heights during the time of the month of Tishrei at some point. And so therefore he'd be able to have them all come to his wedding. And so he wanted to get married during the month of Tishrei. So they wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, and the Rebbe was a very strong proponent that engagement should be as short as possible. So the Rebbe said they should get married during the month of Tishrei. So they opened up a calendar. Tishrei is full of holidays and full of days they do get married and don't get married. And on top of all the regular holidays, there's also Hasidic days that we celebrate. And they chose the 12th day of the month of the 12th day of the month of Tishrei because the 13th day of the month of Tishrei is the yahrzeit, the day of passing of the fourth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Maharash. So they knew that the 13th day they can't choose because the Rebbe is going to have a big Hasidic gathering. And they also knew that the 12th day, a lot of the people from Seattle will be very excited to come in for the 12th day because like this, they'll be able to stay an extra day and be by the Rebbe's Hasidic gathering. They wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave them a blessing for that day. The morning of the wedding, the bride wakes up, and there's a phone call for her. She's getting ready for the wedding, and who's on the phone? A Jew named Rabbi Klein. Who's Rabbi Klein? His blessed memory. Rabbi Klein was the Rebbe's person, one of the Rebbe's secretaries. And he tells her, listen, the Rebbe knows that you're supposed to get married tonight, and normally the Rebbe's Hasidic gathering is the next night. But for whatever spiritual reason the Rebbe has, the Rebbe said he needs to bring tonight, not tomorrow night, for whatever reason. And the Rebbe wants that he knows that it's going to be that you're getting married tonight. So the Rebbe wants that the bride should not be not happy. So the Rebbe wants to know if you could please make sure to tell all the people, all the vendors, and part of the wedding that the wedding is going to start on time sharp, and like this, at the end of the wedding, you'll be able to come over to the Rebbe's Chassidic gathering with the whole wedding, and you'll be able to do the Sheva Brachas, a very big merit. You'll be able to do the Sheva Brachas by the Rebbe's gathering, and the Rebbe will be there to hear the Sheva Brachas. So the Rebbe wants to know if he has your permission to do a Chassidic gathering tonight. Now go tell the Rebbe no. What choice does she have? She has no choice. She can tell the Rebbe no. So she says, of course the Rebbe could make the Fabrengen tonight, don't worry. She hangs up the phone, and she's very, very upset. And boy, is she upset. Nobody's going to come to her wedding. Who's going to come to the wedding when the Rebbe is supposed to be Fabrengen? They're going to want to be preparing for the Fabrengen. They're going to this. She's all upset. She calls all the vendors, and she tells them the wedding's going to start on time. But she already knows that if she has 10 people by her wedding, it's a miracle. An hour later, she's crying this whole hour. She gets a phone call Who's the phone call from? The phone call's from her rabbi, Rabbi Chezky. Rabbi Chezky says, I heard you have the big schus and the big merit that the Rebbe's you're gonna do Sheva Brachas by the Rebbe's Farbringen. She says, yeah, Rabbi Chezky, I have the big honor, nobody's gonna be by my wedding. She says, what do you mean? I promise you I'm gonna be there. She says, yeah, and at 9:30 you're gonna leave and bounce from my wedding with everybody else to go to the Farbringen. She says, no, I'm gonna be there until the end. She says, yeah, what about the groom's rabbi? He's going to leave. Rabbi Levitin's came all the way from Seattle. He's going to think he's going to miss a Farbringen. She says, I promise you, I'm going to call Rabbi Levitin right now. Calls Rabbi Levitin and calls him back and says, Rabbi Levitin promised me he's going to be by the Farbringen, by the wedding until the end. So she says, you know what? Who needs all the other people? My rabbi and my groom's rabbi is going to be there. Who needs the rest of the wedding? I'll have the saddest wedding, but at least my rabbi will be there. Time is running late. So to make a long story short, she opens up her veil after her chuppah and she looks around and she discovers that apparently someone from the Rebbe's office, together with someone from Machon Chana, together with someone from Levitin's office, made sure that every available person in Crown Heights was going to be at that wedding that night. And she opens up shakes her veil for chuppah, at the end of the chuppah, she takes off her veil and she sees a big, huge crowd. Some of the people she didn't even know. To make it even more, at that time, right at the end of her chuppah, the Rebbe was leaving 770. And the Rebbe was in his car, and he was about to pull out a 770. The Rebbe had the driver stop the car, and the Rebbe got out of his car, walked over to the bride and the groom right after the chuppah to wish them mazel tov, and then went back to his car and went home for a little bit as he would customarily do before a Chassidic gathering. She says, later on, she says, to have such a wedding like I had would have been impossible. The amount of joy that we had by the wedding. And then we walked in, the whole crowd, we walked from the wedding hall, which was down the block from 770, and we all walked together to the wedding. And I came to the Farbringen, to the Chassidic gathering, and I came in my bride's gown. It was the one time in my life I got a front seat right there in front of, I could see directly me in front of the Rebbe. Who's not going to let the bride sit right there? And as soon as we settle and we start listening, what's the topic that the Rebbe chooses to speak about? What is the Rebbe talks about the Mishnah being misamech, making a chassan, a bride and a groom happy. And then the honor to see the Rebbe's smile of when the Rebbe is saying, they're saying the blessings, they're saying that the bracha for the Sheva brachas, and the Rebbe's smile and the Rebbe's loud answer, Amen. She says, today I look back 30 years and I say, wow, what did the Rebbe realize? That a bride needs a little bit of bribery and a little bit to take away hers to make sure she doesn't suffer. To have the Rebbe understood that. It comes to 3 weeks, and we have to remember that the matis that we need to remember that to give this. You know, I love listening to the older people. Like I said in the beginning, listening to the older people here in Shul. This idea of thinking of another person, it today in the 21st century, with cell phones and with all the apps, we have an attention span of less than 3.5 seconds. To care about another person is very, very hard. But this is something that I don't know, those from the previous generation. You have to be the matis to tie it into what we spoke about in the beginning. We have to give the children and the grandchildren and your great grandchildren this fundamental, especially during the 3 weeks, to remember that this is what makes us grow. This is what will make us be able to continue. This is what makes us that we'll be able to give over to our children and to our great children the same love that we have for another person. Will be able to make us grow and be a good person for forever and ever. So I want to wish with L'chaim, would end with this, that we should be the matis, we should be the strong foundation for our next generations, maseh, for their growth. And during these 3 weeks, when we give them this fundamentals of caring and thinking and recognizing another person, we will surely come to having the third temple without any waiting, and we'll do it all with joy. L'chaim.
L'chaim, Rabbi.
Can I ask one question, Rabbi?
Rabbi.
To me?
Yes.
As many as you want until Rabbi Smith throws me off.
He's not going to.
You're fine.
I wanted to know, you said that you went to listen to the Rebbe's, what the Rebbe said on his 70th birthday in order to know something about your father's 71st birthday. Can you tell me what it was that you found?
So actually, what I was really going to look for is what I mentioned, which was the Rebbe, when the Rebbe speaks about how when you turn 70 years old, it's not a time for retirement. But instead, what I found was a very, I try to remember, it was a few weeks ago, a very, very beautiful blessing that the Rebbe was wishing. And the Rebbe was demanding from Hashem that Jewish people need to have their needs and to do it without sorrow. And the Rebbe then brought out, I can't remember all the details right now, the Rebbe brought out that what we said before, that Hashem is very kind. And the Rebbe said that when you want to give something with kindness, that means it has to come without any struggle. And the Rebbe then said that, because if the Rebbe explained then that if it comes with a struggle, that means it's not the kindest possible way, and it's not in the fullest measure, because I had to work hard for it. That means I didn't get it easily. I didn't get it the right way. The right way means if I have it easily. And in that specific talk, the Rebbe was giving a blessing that interesting enough, the Rebbe was talking a lot about health and physical blessings, that we should have them all in a very easy way. So
Thank you very much.
pleasure.
Any other questions for Rabbi Altein? Any other questions?
I was going to say that I remember the Rebbe spoke about the decreasing in simcha, and the Rebbe emphasized, and how do we decrease in simcha? In simcha, that the decrease in simcha has to be b'simcha.
Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi Altein. This was wonderful. Hashem should give you a lot of hatzlacha, bracha, and hatzlacha, and all your
Amen.
wonderful work. And it's a great pleasure to have you. Also, anyone, if we have any guests over here, I just want to make sure you're aware of the fact that we have this program every single day. If anyone wants to participate, you're more than welcome to. It's the same link. You could always come 3 o'clock in the afternoon every single day, and 10 o'clock in the morning.
Time.
What is that?
3 o'clock Florida time.
Florida time. 3 to 4 every day, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. every day. And so we'd love to have you. If you know of anyone that has free time and would be able to learn and enjoy and participate, we'd love to have them as well. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Yashikaya.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.
Mel, good to see you.